Hello, and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today, we're going to take a look at this MFJ 945D tuner that I picked up for 20 bucks at the Sussex, New Jersey Hamfest. So the MFJ 945 is sort of a basic T-network tuner. It's got two capacitor controls here and a switched inductor control here. And it's got a cross needle meter in the middle so that you can see forward power, reflected power, and SWR all at the same time. And the meter has two scales, 30 watts and 300 watts, controlled by this button here. The red button turns on and off a backlight that needs a separate power supply to operate. So this tuner has one input from the radio here and then one output to the antenna. This, of course, is a ground lug, and then over here is a DC input jack for powering the backlight. Now this particular tuner has an extra hole drilled in here. We'll find out what that's for a little later in the video. So the 945D covers the HF amateur bands up to 10 meters. The newer 945E will also cover 6 meters. So I'd consider the 945 sort of a medium-sized manual tuner. It's small enough, light enough, and rugged enough to use on a portable activation, and cheap enough not to worry too much about if you kind of bang it around, especially if you buy one used at a Hamfest like I did. So you can see this particular tuner has been used a little bit. It's got some mismatched feet on the bottom, some scuffed up paint on the top, and the aforementioned extra hole in the back. So what I want to do now is pop the lid off of this thing and take a look inside and see if there were any modifications made, or we can figure out what that extra hole was for. So here's a look inside the tuner. Now, I'm not real familiar with these tuners, so I don't know what is factory in here and what isn't, but there's some things that stand out to me. The first one is right where this extra hole is drilled. You can see there's a blue wire that has nothing connected to it. Now, what's kind of mysterious here is that this blue wire is tacked to this white and kind of bare wire that are tacked together along the back. Now the white wire seems to connect the two SO239s together, but those are already tied to the chassis. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But this ultimately connects over to this variable capacitor here. So I have no idea what would have been connected up to this wire and why it's no longer part of the tuner. Now it seems a little redundant to have a wire connecting the chassis side of the two SO239s together. But if I turn the tuner around, I have a theory as to why somebody might want to do that. Now, if you look here, on the bottom of each of the SO239 connectors, you can see that there is a rivet that holds it into the chassis. So I went online to find a photo of an unmodified tuner, and I found that from the factory, these would have come riveted. There wouldn't have been screws on one side. So I think maybe what the previous owner was thinking was that those rivets didn't provide the best RF connection to the chassis. So I think the previous owner added a nut and a screw to the one side of the SO239s to make sure that their chassis side was really well bonded to the chassis. And then, to add a layer of extra insurance, these ground wires were put in to make double sure that they were connected together. But that's not the only interesting thing that's going on in here. If you guys look, you should be able to see this really long screw protruding through this side of the tuner. Now again, that seems a little mysterious, and I don't really have an explanation for it, but I'm pretty sure it's not factory. And then if we take a closer look at where that screw comes through the side of the tuner, you can see that the top of the side rail is sort of like melted, like a soldering iron got too close to it. And then on the inside surface of the plastic side, there's a bunch of little solder blobs there too. So I don't know what that's all about, but something definitely happened inside this tuner at one point. Now if I start taking a closer look in this area, it gets even a little more interesting. If you look at the bottom of the chassis here, you can see that there's a black mark. So it looks like something either got really hot there or maybe even burned a little bit. And in fact, I don't know if you guys can see it on the circuit board or not, but there's a bunch of sort of like black specks on here. So it almost leads me to believe that whatever was in here might have blew up a little bit. Now one last thing that I noticed in here, and this may be factory, I'm not really sure, but you can see there's a wire along the bottom of the coil. You can see right here it hooks around and there's some solder on it. It looks like something might have been soldered to it at one point in time and was since removed. And again, maybe that's factory, but probably not. Now, aside from the modifications that we just took a look at in the tuner, it all looks functional and seems like it's okay. If I shake it around, hopefully you guys can see that the needles on the meter seem to be moving okay. And if I turn the controls, everything seems to function like it should. So I have no reason to believe that this won't work. Let's get it hooked up to a radio and see what happens. So I've got my FT891 connected up to the tuner, and I've got a small dummy load on the back of the tuner. The radio is set to AM mode and putting out 5 watts. So that should be a good test to see if anything happens over on the tuner. So I'm going to set the transmitter and antenna controls to about their halfway mark, and I'll start off at A on the inductor. I'll key up and see if anything happens. And I've also got the FT891 set up so that the SWR is displayed on the bar graph. Okay, so it looks like everything was working with the tuner. Both needles moved, and I got an SWR rating of about 1.7 or so. And that kind of corroborates to what we saw on the radio, which was around 1.7, 1.8 or so on the bar graph. So now I'll key up and try and zero out the SWR if I can. So that all looked pretty good to me. I was seeing 5 watts of output power on the meter with 1.1 SWR, and that correlates to what we were seeing on the radio. So I think it's okay. So I did this test on 80 meters. I'll switch over to 20 and see what I get there. So I'm on 20 meters, AM mode. Radio is set to 5 watts. I didn't touch anything on the tuner. Let's see what we get. And again, the needles moved, and as expected, the SWR was way off. So now I'll do some tuning and see if I can get the SWR down. As you can see, I've got the SWR pretty flat. The SWR looks good over here, and power output is reading about 4 watts this time, but that's probably pretty normal. So despite everything that was going on inside of the tuner, looks like it's working just fine. So I really don't know what was done to it or why it was undone. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to support my channel in another way, please check the links in the description below. Thanks for watching.